Hello, it's week 9 of season 6 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is The Hollywood Party. Before I start, I need to correct one of my lines from last week. I said at one point, the things that Aunt B does as sheriff. I should have said the things that Aunt B knows that Andy does as sheriff. Sorry about that. But what's going on this week? Well, Dee and Andy and Aunt B are still in Hollywood. And they get a letter from Helen, and then another one from Goulder. Helen's letter includes a clipping from the Mayberry Gazette. It's the travel column, latitudes and longitudes, where it talks about the Taylors being in California. And then Goulder's letter describes a dogfight down at the filling station. And Andy reads his letter from Helen silently. He don't want to share what's in it. And then he heads down to the studio for some publicity pictures for the movie, Sheriff Without a Gun. He's gonna pose with the leading lady, Miss Darlene Mason. She's real pretty. And then he meets the publicity agent. This guy is exaggerating everything about Andy. His height, he exaggerates by 2 inches, and then he says that Andy rides a horse while he's doing his sheriffing work, and then he wants to say that Andy has a lot of girlfriends, and Andy puts his foot down on that last one. He says, no, I go with one girl. And then they go to Darlene's dressing room. She's the leading lady. And Andy's kind of nervous. She's dirtily dressed. And he says he's never been in a lady's dressing room before. And she says, oh, we're kind of casual out here in Hollywood. And after she goes and gets her dress on, they start taking pictures of Andy and Darlene and having them toes real close together. The last one has them cheek to cheek. And then that picture appears in the Mayberry newspaper. And back in Mayberry, Helen sees it, and she's not happy about it. Meanwhile, Andy calls Helen, and she calls him a Hollywood playboy, and says he looked in the picture with Miss Mason that like he was enjoying himself a little bit too much. Yeah, she tells Andy that he and Darlene Mason would make a good couple, and she hangs up on him. And then Andy calls up Darlene Mason, and he asks to have supper with her at 7 o'clock that night. This is something that the agent had suggested that they do anyway, back when they were posing for pictures, so they can discuss the movie. And he tells Aunt Dee and Ultie his plans, and they say, okay, we'll go out for pizza. And they think his plans to go see Miss Mason are very interesting. So he goes over to her place, and they're both real dressed up, and she tells him a good place to call and make a dinner reservation. So he calls up, and when he hangs up, he tells her, yeah, they said it'll be 30 minutes wait. And Darlene says, okay, let's just wait here. And they talk about what they're going to order for supper, and then she asks him about Mayberry. And he tells her the kinds of things that folks do in small towns for entertainment, and she says that sounds like her childhood in Kansas. And she tells him what they used to do in her hometown, and then Andy starts to get uncomfortable. And he says, I shouldn't be here. I got a girl back home. We had a fight on the phone, and then I came over here. And she says she understands. Let's go out to supper now. And Andy says, okay. Apparently he feels better that once he thinks he knows that the leading lady knows that Andy has spoken for her, and that she knows that this will be a platonic business dinner only. Meanwhile, Helen feels bad about being so mean to Andy on the phone, and calls his hotel room back. And Opie answers. And Opie tells Helen that his pa's not in because he went over to Darlene Mason's apartment wearing his blue suit. So Helen gets mad all over again. And Andy tries to call her back when he gets back to the hotel, and Opie tells him she called, but she hangs up on him again. So Andy goes back to Darlene's place, and he has her call Helen to explain to her that it was a business dinner only, not a romantic one. And Helen understands this time. And then Andy talks to her, and she's real nice to him this time. Except when Darlene kisses Andy innocently enough while he's still on the phone, and Helen hears it, and she says, what was that? And Andy says, she just opened a bottle of pop. And then when Andy comes back to the room, Aunt Dee has already started to tack, and she says Andy should get some copies of the publicity pictures with Miss Mason to take back and show Helen. She doesn't know about all the trouble that one photo in the newspaper already caused, and that Andy had to deal with. We'll see you next week for episode 10, which will be when the Taylors go back to Mayberry. See you then.